So I hope you're sticking with me here. I know it. Things are like, when are you going to get to how we encode the words? Well, we're working up to it. So we have the idea. We already know we can use string split to split it into words, split a string into words. We have now the RE sub function where we can get rid of any of the non-word characters. And now we understand a little bit about using the ORD function to turn each one of those characters in a word into a number, and then we have to add them together. And so there's a built-in function in Python called sum, and it's really handy. You can give it, for instance, a list of 1, 2, 3, and it will sum that up and say that is 6. So if we were to manually take each one of the characters, DONT, and say you run ORD function on each one of those, that's going to return, let's just quickly look at this. If we look at that, that's going to return the values 68, 1, 11, 110, and 116, which we could take that and sum this, and that returns 405. Or we could take this, and obviously we're going to get the same answer either way. So we have this idea, okay, so really what we need to do is apply the ordinal function to each character in the word don't, or in whatever ours is our word. So I hope this just like immediately rings alarm bells in your head. You're like, I know how to apply a function to every element in a list. You could use a list. Well, first off, you can always start off with using a for loop. So let's just think about that. So our word is don't, and so I could have some sort of an array maybe of values. So I'll call it vals. It's going to be an empty list, and I could say for char in my word vals dot append the ordinal value of the character. Char. And then if I look at vals, it's going to be those same values that I have, and so I can say sum of vals, and it's going to give me the answer 405, which is what I'm looking at. So a for loop is really, I think, is maybe the first thing you might reach for. It's the most naive, I think, approach. I think a much more Pythonic approach would be to use a list comprehension. The purpose of a list comprehension is to produce a list. The purpose of a for loop is to process a bunch of things and do some things, but really the purpose of a for loop is not to create a new list. It's to process all the elements in some sort of a sequence in some way. For loops are incredibly useful, but using them in this way to build up another list is not, especially in such a simple case like this, this is definitely not the best use of a for loop. While you might still be coming around to the idea of a list comprehension, this is really a very efficient way to do this. So we just take the meat here. Ord char is what we're trying to do. We're trying to create the ordinal value of char for char in word. And that produces the same list. And so we can wrap that in a sum. And that is a much, much shorter way of writing this 3 lines here or actually 4, because we still have to summarize this. 4 lines to get the sum of all these ordinal values for each character in the word. We can just write that as a single line here using a list comprehension. And we can also, if you are comfortable with the list comprehension, I always stress to try to think about how you could write that as a map function. So I'm going to have to say list here in the REPL, because map is a lazy function, but I can say map into this lambda to create an anonymous function, and the anonymous function is going to take a single value char, and it's going to return ord of char. And I can pass that word. I don't have to say for char in word, because word is a string, and in a list context, it's just going to be turned into a list of characters. So if I evaluate that, that also produces the same list. That's what map does, is it produces a list. But the thing to note here is that we don't have to write it with this lambda. We could actually just write it because the ORD function expects a single value. I can actually write this. map, ord, word. And that produces the same list. So you have to ask yourself which is the easiest code to read and to maintain moving forward. I think that looking at this, map, ord, word, is just beautiful. It's just very simple. And if you understand map and you understand the ord function and you understand how word is getting turned into a list of characters, that just is perfect. And so instead of saying list here, I could say sum, and it produces the exact same answer. So that is how we move from a for loop to a list comprehension to a map, and how they all produce. We're in this particular way. We're trying to use these to produce a list of the ordinal values for the characters in the word, and they all give you the same answer. So you should use whichever one makes the most sense to you, or whichever one your team has decided to write. But I hope that you understand that they're all completely interchangeable, and I hope that you're getting more comfortable with the idea of map and higher order functions. Next, we're going to talk about how this idea of sum relates to the idea of reducing a list.